bunch of smarmy teenagers with ridiculous haircuts trying to escape the clutches of an alien race of clowns is the kind of cheesy premise that makes for a perfect asymmetrical horror game. Following in the footsteps of Friday the 13th, Evil Dead, and many more licensed games, the 1988 cult classic film Killer Klowns From Outer Space is the latest horror movie to try its hand at stealing our still-beating hearts with high-stakes murder sports. And it largely succeeded at capturing mine. The chaotic, unabashedly goofy competitive matches had my crew screaming with delight round after round, as we turned each other into cotton candy ornaments and popped one another's red noses. The silly rounds of mayhem do lack variety, and eventually begin to feel as shallow as the graves you'll dig for your victims, which can make the good times fairly short-lived. But the 25 hours I got out of it before hitting that wall were quite memorable indeed. Bucking the traditional asymmetrical structure slightly, each match pits 7 hapless humans against 3 killers, as opposed to the usual 4-on-1 you see from most games that followed in Dead by Daylight's bloody footsteps. The clowns are preposterously over the top, and run around turning humans into sacks of cotton candy with ray guns, hunting teens using a balloon hound on a leash, and mowing terrified victims down with an invisible car. It's truly some of the zaniest stuff I've seen in a multiplayer game in a long time, and it never fails to make me laugh. I especially appreciate the little details, like how the clown's shoes make a comical squeak when you walk, alerting everyone nearby to your presence and leaving cartoonish boot prints all over the floor. Admittedly, it's nowhere near as much fun to play as a human because they're just not as original or goofy as their pursuers. You mostly just sneak around searching for weapons, keys, gas canisters, and other things they need to mount an escape. However, getting away does have a novel twist, because none of the rescue options will allow more than 3 of the 7 teens to leave at once. This boat can be repaired, but only fits 3 people, while this bridge exit is so rickety it could collapse after it's been crossed by just 2 if they're not careful. During my time in these outlandish bouts, this led to several hilarious and tense interactions, where someone on our team would panic and use up one of the exits to escape a dicey situation alone, leaving the remaining survivors in a lurch. Because there's only 4 or 5 possible exits on each of the 5 maps, that makes evacuation for the remaining 6 humans a lot more difficult, and you don't want to be that person. Sorry guys. It's also cool that if a human gets killed or manages to get out of dodge early, they're given the option to play a series of simple but amusing carnival-themed minigames. By completing these, they're able to help out the remaining teammates with items to improve their chances, like health, weapons, or even a key card they might need to escape through one of the exits. I've never seen something like this implemented in the genre before, and it's a great way to keep you engaged after you've completed your role in the match, especially if you've got survivor's guilt after taking one of the exits for yourself. Even though Killer Klowns borrows a whole heck of a lot from the asymmetrical horror games that came before it, it doesn't feel like an immediately dull carbon copy with yet another cult horror movie skin draped over it. Aside from the macabre humor, the biggest shakeup is that, with a full 10-player match, there's a whole lot more action happening around the map at all times. As a human, you might find yourself coordinating with a small group of survivors to repair the boat and make an escape, while another posse across the map stages a daring rescue attempt to free an ally that's been cocooned in cotton candy and is slowly being turned into clown juice. Meanwhile, as a clown, you might find yourself hunting down and killing a teenager hiding in a porta potty, while elsewhere, your 2 allies are collecting cotton candy to power their clown machines in order to trigger the clownpocalypse and win the match. Another major differentiator in Killer Klowns is how effectively humans are able to fight back and even kill clowns once they find the right weapons. A solo clown chasing a squad of 4 humans is likely to be in quite a pickle once those teens realize they can just turn around and wail on the grinning goof with axes and baseball bats until it's forced to spend a minute in timeout. And there's no carnival games for you to play, silly clown. But because clowns don't have to loot to be powerful, don't run out of ammo, and only die temporarily, there's still a ton of reasons for humans to fear their wacky assailants, especially since ammo is scarce and human weapons break after just a few swings. This means that both sides, clowns and humans, have to work with their teammates to achieve victory consistently, and whichever side forms a more cohesive unit is likely to win. That's exactly what I want in a game like this. It's an all too common problem for asymmetrical games to become one-sided fights when it's a single baddie versus a group of survivors. But in Killer Klowns, nobody can really go it alone, and I've seen a lot more close matches and interesting interactions than I'd usually expect as a result. As yet another ongoing game you're expected to play a whole lot of, Killer Klowns has unlockables earned by playing matches, including both cosmetic stuff for pure flair and new character classes and abilities that can have a very real impact in-game. You can get this beefy tank clown class that has health to spare, or this small but mighty brawler who moves in quickly and uses boxing gloves to knock the snot out of any annoying adolescents. Meanwhile, the humans unlock different archetypes with names like rebellious and tough that mostly play the same, differentiated only by some simple stats that might make one person have more stamina while another does more damage with melee weapons. Unlocking the various clown classes helped inject some variety into my time, and most of them feel great. My favorite is the Tracker Clown, who is an expert at sniffing out slippery earthlings and turning them into spools of sugar with his shotgun. Unfortunately, all the gameplay-altering stuff can be unlocked just after a handful of hours, depending on how well you're doing. And after getting a feel for each of them, things become pretty predictable, and therein lies Killer Klowns' biggest shortcoming. Each of the 5 maps has a different layout to learn, but all the exits are the same. There's always a boat in need of fuel and a spark plug, and there's always a bridge or tunnel exit that requires a melee weapon and a gate key to pass through. And there's always a lighthouse. Wait, wrong game actually. Anyway, the point is that playing as a human never has any variety to it. As a clown, you're always just guarding exits, collecting cotton candy cocoons, and killing teens. So your role remains similarly unchanged every match. After 10 plus hours, when everyone I was playing with understood the map layouts and all the possible exits, things began to feel pretty repetitive as we started to run out of ways to keep the fun alive. That's a major problem for a multiplayer game that only has one game mode and that you're supposed to be interested in grinding endlessly. There's certainly plenty of room to keep honing your skills as a human or clown, learning to dominate those with inferior map knowledge or combat prowess, but that climb becomes a bit monotonous after you've seen the same map 50 times and have repeated the same escape murdering mechanics ad nauseum. It would be great if more maps, game modes, character classes, or alternate escape options were thrown into the mix to revitalize things. Here's hoping developer Illfonic is eyeing those kinds of updates in the near future. But for now, I found my interest waning after just a week. Killer Klowns From Outer Space, the game, is as silly and entertaining as the movie that spawned it, and that makes for a surprisingly compelling asymmetrical multiplayer game to boot. The back and forth between the wacky, murderous clowns and the whiny teens is a blast no matter which side of the equation you find yourself on, and unlockable classes and abilities add some much-needed variety, for a little bit at least. After a handful of hours, once you've tried out all the human and clown options and learned the layouts of the small number of maps, that competitive loop can get pretty stale. Here's hoping developer Illfonic has some tricks up their baggy, checkered sleeves and can deliver updates to keep the clown car chugging along beyond that. But for now, Killer Klowns makes for some brief but really enjoyable hijinks. For more, check out our reviews of Capes and X Defiant. And for everything else, stick with IGN.